Hello, I'm with Blake today from Sano State Taylored Psychology, out of Calgary and St. Albert, Edmonton, right? Is that St. Albert and Edmonton considered the same place?
So St. Albert, well, it's a different city now. In Edmonton, we do have a satellite office in there now that we've just
Right.
opened in the last few weeks. So yeah,
In Edmonton or St. Albert?
in Edmonton. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
So
I'm
you
not
actually
sure.
have an office in Edmonton and St. Albert,
At
and
St.
is
Albert,
it
and now
two?
two in Calgary,
Okay.
and Airdrie looks like it should be open by June. Is what the
Okay,
plan is.
cool.
Yeah.
And for all those people who are watching this in the States or whatever, that's Alberta, Canada. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we know Blake for quite a long time, and he's doing a psychologist in Alberta, and he's managed to expand his business because he's helped out so many people. So why don't you tell me a little bit about your journey into neurofeedback and kind of what got you started, and just take it from there.
Well, I find a lot of people start out in neurofeedback because of their own life-changing experience. And for me, it's a little bit different. Like I learned about neurofeedback when I was doing my PhD. I was at a conference for the American Counseling Association in San Francisco. And there was somebody that was doing a presentation on neurofeedback. And so I attended this presentation. I remember thinking this is weird. What are these guys doing? What really grabbed my attention is when they started showing the science, not how it works, but these are the results we're getting. And that's what really grabbed my attention, because I was like, are they really getting that good of results? Because that sounds better than most other therapies like counseling or medication or anything like that, for a lot of these things. So I was like, if they're really getting that good of results, I need to look into this and figure out what it is. So that's really where my journey in neurofeedback started.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So you're a multi-location, you have counselors and therapists and yourself as a psychologist. Are you still doing those things as well as neurofeedback, or do you kind of combine them together?
So I still do. So I've got a business partner as well that's a psychologist. I still do a lot of counseling as well. I would say about 50% of my time is counseling, but like over 90% of the business at the different locations is neurofeedback.
Okay, so that's the main focus.
Yeah.
So, okay. Now I know that you've been doing neurofeedback. So how long have you been at it?
Yeah, it's a good question. Somewhere between 10, 12 years, around there. I think, yeah, 10 or 11 years.
I think we met about 7 years ago. I'm pretty
Yeah,
sure it was about that.
I think 7 years ago. Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So, you've kind of grown into these multi-locations, and I know when we first met, there's just you, and I think you had one other person, right?
No. No,
Oh, it was just you?
It was just me. It was just me, and I had
Wow.
my one chair, my one system, my one little room. It was after starting with you. It wasn't. I could see why it'd be confusing, because quickly after I hired my first staff member. But I'm pretty sure when we
Okay.
started, it was just me.
Oh, that's awesome. It's great to
Yeah.
see that. So that's not really what today's about, though. This is about explaining to people about how you help people, right? So in your words, can you kind of explain a little bit about how neurofeedback works and some of that ins and outs with that?
Yeah, so the way we use it here, we start with a brain scan, a QEEG, where we look at 20 locations all across the scalp, to recognize the electrical activity created by the brain, or our brain waves. How is the brain working? How is it functioning? And we'll identify the areas that aren't functioning properly, where it's out of balance, left to right, where it might be too fast or too slow. How's the connection, the synchrony in the different areas? We use that to help guide us. Okay, these are the areas we want to work on. Now, also as psychologists, I like to implement other assessment tools with it from the beginning, including computerized cognitive testing, just some questionnaires to see depression, anxiety, how's your sleep, that kind of stuff. And then just a quick structured interview just to get to know the clients a little bit. But once we have all four of those things, we're able to see, okay, here's the brain. These are the areas here we want to work on. This is working well. Let's focus on these. So then what we do during the session is let's give the brain feedback, show it what it's doing. And when it's doing more of what we want, we encourage that. with audio tones or a visual, something like that, and train the brain to get better at doing those things.
Okay. So anybody that's watching this, if you've watched other interviews that, I've done with other neurofeedback providers, I always ask, basically, when most people, the public thinks about mental health challenges, right? They think about, a label, a condition, right? And then they think about medication generally, because a lot of people are under the impression that mental health is about chemicals in your brain, right? And, we know it's a little bit different than that. Could you explain a little bit about that in your words?
Yeah, so we really have to recognize the brain, the functioning of the brain, the signaling in the brain. It's an electrochemical signal, okay? So there's this electrical signal that goes along the neuron, and then in between the neurons, it's this little gap where chemicals will go to send that message. So it's going electrical, chemical, electrical, chemical. Now, so if we're looking at trying to affect the way that the brain works, okay, we can look at the chemical way, and that would be through medication, or possibly diet, or even increasing blood flow to the brain somehow. That's how we can really affect the chemical part of the brain. But the electrical part of the brain, well, this is where we use neuromodulation techniques like neurofeedback to really help the firing of those of the neurons.
Okay, that's a great explanation. So basically, it's a combination of the two. Do you find that the medication might be a little bit overemphasized for this for mental health?
Well, the issues we have with medication are first off, typically people are given medication without any type of scan, without really looking at what's going on with the brain. And the second thing is the side effects that come from medication. With every medication, there's a risk that it's going to have these side effects, and sometimes worse than others. And some of the side effects can be quite serious, some of them more tolerable. And then the third issue is, to date, we don't have any medication that cures anything mental health wise. And what I mean by that, it can help, but it wears off and you're in that same place. And so those are some of the issues that we have with medication. Now, the other thing is the effectiveness of medication. To be quite honest, it's not high enough, in my opinion. It's not high enough as where we should be. Now, there's a place for medication, of course there is, but do less harm first, or do no harm first. And I think the issues that we have is when it comes to mental health, people will typically go to their medical doctor for help. And they're just not trained in mental health. They're trained in medication, they're trained in surgery. So where do they refer to? Well, here, let's open my drawer of medications and let's try something here. And so I think and I'm not a hater on medical doctors. That's their role, that's their job. We just need to realize that their job is medication when it comes to mental health. They're not really helpful for the most part outside of that, because that's not what they're trained in. And
Right.
There are other really good options that are more effective than medication, that have longer outcomes than medication, that are safer, that are easier. So let's look at some of these other things.
For sure. Okay, that's cool. So when you think about medication, you think about neurofeedback, and you kind of, the risks or the side effects. With neurofeedback, what do you see on the risks and side effects with that? And we've got to be fair here, right? Because we're talking about medication. What about with that?
Yeah. So first off, some of the difficulties with neurofeedback is depending on people's insurance companies, it may or may not be covered. Usually at our clinics it is, but it might not be, where medication might be, so that there's cost. And another big issue with it is it's a lot of time, it's a big time commitment. You got to go regularly for a number of sessions to see good results, kind of like going to the gym. It's a commitment of time. Now, when it comes to side effects, yeah, there can be side effects. And a lot of people, I've heard a lot of people say, well, neurofeedback, there aren't any negative side effects. And I think that's just dishonest. It is incredibly safe. Let's be honest here. Like, it's incredibly safe. But some of the things that I'll see people have, and although uncommon or quite rare, people might afterwards be a bit tired or maybe a little bit lightheaded. And sometimes there's fluctuations in mood, maybe some irritability. I notice particularly if somebody's been through a lot of trauma, the brain will start to process some of this trauma. And that can come with crying over every silly song on the radio or mad about everybody in the parking lot. So there are some of these things that can come out from that. But what we're talking about here, generally speaking, these are things that you sleep off when it comes to the side effects.
Okay. It was really interesting. I had an interview last week, I believe it was, with this doctor out of Florida who had been in a really serious car accident a number of years ago, to the point wheelchair disabled, had people looking after him. He had previously did neurofeedback for his clients before that, but he couldn't get it fixed. I mean, he was in rough shape, right? He figured out a way using different supplements to be actually able to sit in a neurofeedback chair for 4 hours at a time. And he did that, and he actually recovered from it. And now he has this like 15 clinics. He's thriving, it's unbelievable. So like the power of the brain impacts so much of our lives, right? So when it's not working properly, I mean, our lives pretty much suck, right? But even physical things like that, I was really surprised. I knew it could help a little bit with chronic pain, but man, that was something else.
Like every single week as I'm doing these progress assessments, follow-up assessments, as these clients have gone through neurofeedback, I'm consistently hearing things like, this changed my life, or I cannot believe how much this has helped. Like, it's not 100%, and not everybody says that, but the majority of our clients are noticing very significant improvements, and there are a lot. Like I said, every week there's another client or two or three or four saying,
right.
Like, wow, I cannot believe how much this has helped me. And with so many different areas. Like, I don't like sounding like a snake oil salesman, like, oh yeah, it helps with everything. But let's get real here. Like, this is the brain. Like, if we get the brain working well, what could improve?
Yeah, no doubt. So let's contrast a little bit with your field, with counseling.
Yeah.
So without neurofeedback, I mean, I believe in counseling. I know they can help people tremendously. So I am not anti-counseling at all, right? However, I also know that people can be going to counseling for years and not really see significant change, right? So I wanted to address it because when you think about the cost of neurofeedback, right, or the time commitment, we're talking about maybe somebody goes to therapy for 2 or 3 years and doesn't really, get the change they're looking for, and condensing it down to a month or two, right?
Yeah.
For pretty much the same cost as counseling sessions go, right? So to me, especially, doing both of those things at once with somebody, it must be, kind of putting it on steroids, right?
So oftentimes people will come in because they've heard about neurofeedback, and often people come in for counseling. Now, when I'm first starting with people, depending on what they're going through and what their experiences have been, a lot of the time I'm like, you know what, let's start with neurofeedback. And this is why. It's easier to do. For a lot of things, I actually find it more effective. And third, if afterwards we still want to do some more, then let's do some counseling. But I noticed that we get more out of our counseling sessions when somebody's been through some neurofeedback. When the brain's functioning a little bit better, those counseling sessions seem to be a lot more effective.
Okay.
Now, there is the odd thing. And I think a good example would be like grieving of a loss. Sometimes it's like, I just need to talk this out with somebody. I don't need, in a couple sessions kind of thing. It's like, it's not really like, this is healthy brain behavior, but,
right.
So there's the odd thing where I'm like, oh, okay, maybe counseling is the way we should go. A couple sessions like that. But generally speaking, my go-to is a lot more neurofeedback.
Okay. So what do you find with your client base? What are most people dealing with, like, that neurofeedback's helping them with?
Oh boy. So it's a big client base, and I would say some of the most popular things that people come in for: anxiety, depression, mood disorders, ADHD, concussions, trauma. Those are probably the biggest ones. Next, I would say autism spectrum disorder, migraines and headaches, chronic pain. Boy, the list just goes on and on.
Yeah.
And we also have a little portion of our business that's just about optimizing, so people whose mental health generally is pretty good, but they're they're training to be in the Olympics or professional athletes and things like that. And so we noticed that, that really helps them a lot. Yeah.
And for business too, right? Business people, or just performing at work, just when your brain works better, you're happier, everything just works better,
Yeah, there's one client he's a day trader, and he's just like, he came in because he brought his kids in. He's like, you've made my home a Zen place. Like, my kids are so chill and awesome now. And he's like, I got to try this too. And then afterwards, he's like, do you know what? Like, my day trading, I'm making so much more money now. And he's like, I just seem to be able to balance the logic a lot easier and let go of the emotion and control that a lot more. He's like, it has helped me with that. And I thought, that wasn't something we were targeting or looking for. It just
that's pretty wild, eh?
When the brain's working better, it just works better.
Yeah, no doubt. That's awesome. Do you ever you talked a little bit about how you got into this. Do you have a personal story or pivotal moment where you actually knew, this was the right decision, how it maybe helped a client or, something that really impacted you?
Oh my goodness. It just goes on and on and on. And it really does. And I can't say that there was just that one, because there are so many. To try to choose just one, I don't even know that I can do that. I can say, like, my personal experience, because my mental health, I felt, has been fine and, good. So I didn't really, do it on myself for reasons other than to let other people practice when I was doing my training when I first started. And so I spent a week in Arizona, and we're training on each other, practicing on each other. And it was after that, and I had finished my master's degree, so I'd done a lot of schooling. But I was just noticing that as I was reading a textbook, I just gobbled up a whole chapter. I got to the end of this chapter, and I was like, wow, that was a short chapter. But I looked back, and it wasn't. I was just so focused, so clear. And I was just like, wow, the difference that it made in myself was I noticed it right there. And I was like, whoa, look what neurofeedback did to me. It was,
That's pretty awesome. That's great. That's neat. Okay. So the field is, evolving, right? There's more technology coming. I know you've been working on your own technology as well. What do you see coming for innovations?
So, oh, wow, that's a really good question. Because some of the things that we're doing here, we're working on things like virtual reality environments that respond to your brain waves we've consulted with hypnotherapists as well as, in developing these guided relaxation, hypnotherapy, neurofeedback sessions. We're just anything we can package all together to try to get the absolute best results out of a single session that we can.
Right.
I do think that AI is really going to be a game changer too in helping the researchers recognize patterns in the brain. Because when we look at the brain, it's the most complex system in the universe. We don't know of anything more complicated than the human brain. We're just scratching the surface. And with the neurofeedback that we understand and know now, okay, there's a little bit. I think AI is really going to help us to pick up patterns and see, oh, this is what's working when the brain's doing that, or these are the difficulties and how we can change that. So,
okay, that's pretty cool. So if the future looks bright with neurofeedback.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah,
awesome.
Because yeah.
So how do you approach this? So somebody, fills out a form or calls you guys, what happens then? Is it a consultation, a free consultation, or is it what do you do?
Yeah.
How do you get somebody engaged?
Yeah. So when somebody reaches out, we'll start with the consultation, and if they can come into the office for it, then we'll try to do a demo as well, so they can sit them in the chair and show them, hey, there's your brainwave, and this is what it's doing, and this is how we go changing it and affecting it. So I like starting with the consultation where people can come in, no questions asked, no cost, just come in. We'll answer all the questions as best as we can. We'll show you what this is. We'll see if this is a good fit for you.
Okay.
And then we'll also talk about, okay, costs and do you have insurance? Great. If not, well, how are we going to make this affordable for you? Because we just don't turn people away because of finances. You know, I'll say that we'll make it work for everyone, however that has to look. So that's what we do in that first consultation. Then the next step is we'll send them forms like consent forms, questionnaires, the cognitive testing, what to expect from neurofeedback. Then they come in, we'll do the brain scan, and then they'll meet with myself or another one of our psychologists, and we'll go over, well, here's your brain. Look at this here. Here are the results from your testing. And yeah, then we'll start the sessions after that.
You got a pretty dialed in process then to really get somebody moving along. That's great to hear. I know you also do virtual consultations as a first step, if needed. So, you know, just wanted to mention that so nobody feels like, you know, I can't make it, whatever. They can still talk with you guys and, you know, get that first step going at least, right? So that's great. Okay. So what advice would you give somebody that's sitting there watching this video, a little bit skeptical, you know, don't really know much about all this stuff? What kind of advice would you give them? You know, if they're dealing with something kind of significant, what would you tell them?
Yeah, you don't have anything to lose from a consultation. You know, like, we're experts in the field. We know what we're talking about. We know what we're doing. And I, you know, like, we have cool staff. Like, we're nice, cool people. Like, honestly, we love to just chat. If you're like, I don't know, call and talk to us. We're not pushy either. It's like, hey, this is what it is. And then if, you know, and we leave it at that. So yeah, if someone's like, I don't know what to do, it's like, just reach out. Just reach out.
I know that a lot of people will go to Google and look at reviews to help making the decision. And I know that that's a bit of a problem in your industry. Just let people know why that is. So when they look and you don't have all these reviews, so they know why, right?
Yeah. And so we're, as psychologists, we're governed by a college. The government has a college that governs us. And within it, they have decided psychologists are not to solicit reviews in any way. And if somebody does offer a review, we're not supposed to use it. And if somebody does just post a review, we're to ask them to take it down. Now, it's something I disagree with. I think it's sort of silly, but that's legally, ethically, this is what we're sort of bound to. So you know, if you look up, there are a few reviews out there, and I do like it when I talk to a client says like, oh, hey, we're supposed to ask you to remove it, and they say no. I kind of like that because all right, I've done my due diligence and
Yeah.
you know, but that's why, you know, and people say, well, why don't you have a lot of reviews? And that's why it's like this. It's an ethical thing within the College of Alberta Psychologists here. So yeah, so if you're looking at, well, why should this guy have reviews if he says he's been around for so long and has all these different clinics? Why are there only a handful of reviews out there? Well, that's why. Yeah.
Right.
It's unfortunate, but that's just how it is.
Yeah. No. Okay. I just wanted to speak to that because, you know, that could be kind of weird when somebody's looking you up with all the success you've had with yourself and your clients, right? You'd think that there'd be hundreds of them, but unfortunately you're not allowed to have them. So, okay. So your profile will be linked under the video to All About Neurofeedback, where they can find out more about you, link to your website, link to, you know, anything that you choose to link on there. But other than that, do you have any final thoughts?
Well, I do want to say, Paul, thanks for doing this. Like, this is what we need. Like, let's find ways to get the word out there. I find that people don't do neurofeedback because they don't know about it. You know, and how many times have I had people just like break down and cry and say, why did my doctor never tell me that this was even an option? Why did nobody tell me about this before? And I just say, I'm sorry, we're trying the best we can to tell the world. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's more needed now than it was when we started together because our world is crazy. It's so polarized. People are so beat down. And I mean, this is just something that can really change your life, right? And make all of those things that don't necessarily go away, right? But it makes it so you can deal with things. And that's what I think is so beautiful about it, right? Because when you can deal with things, you can at least influence your own life the way you want to, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you so much for this, Blake. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your insights. And I'm sure a lot of people are going to find this helpful. Thanks so much.
You're very welcome.